When Ernesto took his job at Abbott, I was far from excited. When he told me we would need to move to Carnate Island as well, I was not happy at all. But I tried to find a good side to the situation. I've always been interested in the history of unique places. What kind of history would we find on Carnate? This scrapbook project was started primarily to fill my time here, but also so I could record what I had discovered. In my exploration of the island, I uncovered many of Carnate's secrets. Though I record them here, I do not think I will tell the world about what I have found. Carnate is a place whose secrets are best kept to itself. The island. Carnate Island is approximately 3 miles wide and lies some 10 miles off the coast of Maryland. In addition to man-made structures, Carnate is also home to a labyrinthine natural cave system unlike anything I have seen before. Through my studies, I learned of the island's dark and unsettling history. Though it may sound ridiculous to say it, Carnate seems to bring out the worst in those who make the mistake of coming here. Abbott State Penitentiary. Originally built as part of Fort Malison to house German POWs during World War II, it was taken over by Maryland following the war and converted into Abbott State Penitentiary. Mostly built out of local quarry rock, the prison is now home to nearly 1,000 inmates and has the worst safety record and highest homicide rate of any prison in the Maryland Department of Corrections system. The state also carries out the majority of its death sentences here. The Death House. The most ominous structure inside of Abbott is the Death House. Electrocution, gas, and lethal injection have all been used within its walls, though only the last is still used today. The Death House is also the prison's oldest structure, built as the administration building when the prison was a POW camp. Its basement was also built during the war, and in it you can still see relics of that time. The basement has been closed off for 20 years. Prison cemetery. When an inmate dies and his family does not claim the body, he is buried here. The cemetery is named after the infamous corrections officer Hermes T. Haight. He was in charge of executions for several decades before finally killing himself in the gas chamber. Also buried here is notorious inmate Horace Gage, who savagely killed his wife on a conjugal visit. To me, the cemetery is the most bleak and depressing place on all of Carnate. The Quarry. At the same time the prison started operation, digging commenced at Carnot Quarry. Prisoners were forced to work this quarry for 12 hours a day, cutting the rock that would be used to build the prison walls. Work conditions in the quarry were far from ideal. Inmates who complained were severely disciplined. Carnot Quarry has not been in use since the 1960s, with its mining equipment simply abandoned where it stood to rust and collapse. Cave-in. At some point in the mid-50s, weak mineshaft support beams gave way and trapped a number of quarry workers under several tons of rubble. The official story was that the prisoners were killed instantly. Other inmates maintained that the workers survived the collapse, but no attempt was made to rescue them. The inmates were so enraged, they revolted against the COs and lynched 5 of them. What really happened may never be known. The Asylum. On the far western edge of Carnate stands an old Victorian home built in 1877. In 1899, the home was converted into the oddly titled Carnate Institution for the Alienated. This small institution was run by one Dr. Killjoy, whose methods were far from conventional and often tragically lethal. What exactly happened to Dr. Killjoy is unknown, but the asylum was abandoned in the 1930s and has been uninhabited ever since. Burned house. Though I know little about this site, these ruins of an old home are oddly fascinating to me. The small house appears to be from the mid-19th century, and I would say it certainly predates the asylum. Nearby is an old abandoned well that seems to be especially deep. Since the house burned down, one cannot help but wonder if Carnate itself was trying to drive away the people who lived inside it. if one chooses to believe in such things. Slave shipwreck. On the northwestern beach of the island is a massive shipwreck from the early 18th century. The ship carried a cargo of slaves and was en route to Norfolk when it was knocked off course and crashed. Apparently, the traders feared releasing the slaves they carried and instead left them trapped in the hull where they were slowly eaten by rats. How the ship has survived the elements nearly 3 centuries is certainly a mystery. The Bluff. On the south side of the island near Fort Malison, there is a bluff which appears to have been forgotten since the 1940s. Along the ocean side of the bluff are 3 wood posts riddled with bullets to which dead bodies are still attached. This seems to be the site of the little-known 1944 execution of 3 American soldiers, executed on suspicion of treason. No actual evidence of wrongdoing was ever found. Crashed plane. This bizarre relic is a Horton 229A1, an experimental plane developed by the Germans during the latter stages of World War II. It crashed on Carnate in 1944 to the great distress of the fort's colonel. Taking his cue from the Japanese internment camps of the West, the colonel wanted to root out the traitors he suspected had led the plane to Carnate. He executed 3 of his own men who happened to be of German ancestry, but who were almost certainly innocent. Why the plane actually crashed here remains a mystery. World War II fort. Built in 1942, Fort Malison served as both coastal defense facility and POW camp. The fort had some 250 men and held approximately 1,000 prisoners. The fort's most notorious story is of its colonel, who executed 3 of his men for treason because a German airplane crashed on the island. A subsequent court-martial found no evidence to justify these executions, and the colonel ended up taking his own life. Old Cemetery. This cemetery is home to the remains of 11 Puritans who were accused of witchcraft and burned at the stake in 1681. Witch burning was all but unheard of on this continent, with other suspected witches, such as those in Salem, having met their demise at the end of a rope. It appears that hanging was not enough for the residents of Goodsmith, no doubt because Carnate Island is a place that drives people to extremes. Burning site. In the 17th century, Carnate was home to a small Puritan village named Goodsmith. In 1681, for unknown reasons, a 13-year-old girl accused several townsfolk of witchcraft. Joined by 2 close friends of hers, the trio formed an unholy alliance, which led to the burning of 11 people, all of whom are interred nearby. Shortly thereafter, the girls mysteriously disappeared. This is the place where those terrible burnings occurred. The Lighthouse. The lighthouse is the oldest standing structure on Carnate Island. Its cornerstone states its date of construction as 1834. The light was originally oil-powered, but since the 1950s has run off of a nearby generator. Similarly, the lighthouse's rotation was originally powered by a system of gears that would periodically need to be recranked. To this day, when the power goes off, the motion needs to be restarted by hand cranking. The town. Built on the site of the Puritan village of Goodsmith, this town is home to nearly 30 corrections officers and their families. It has a single dilapidated general store, a small, overgrown park, and a church that for as long as anyone can remember has had no minister. It is generally agreed that no one would live in this depressing place were it not for the daunting distance back to the mainland and lack of ferry service. The docks. The only functional dock remaining on Carnate, this is the sole point of entry for inmates and their visitors, as well as corrections officers, and those of us who happen to be married to them. I remember the first day I came to Carnate. It was raining in sheets, and the ship had trouble docking. I remember thinking the island didn't want us coming here. I've long thought it would have been better if we had turned back then.